All right. We are live streaming on YouTube. It is Monday, January 6th, and this is the 101st episode of Solid Ground. And today it is just the two of us, Jennifer. Nice, cozy little chat.
Very, very cozy. I'm very bundled up. There's several inches of snow on the ground here,
Wow.
and it's quite chilly.
Did you have a white Christmas?
No, no,
Mm-mm.
no. That would have been
Just
lovely. Did you?
no. We had a very green Christmas because we were
Oh, that's
in
right. You were in
Hawaii.
Hawaii.
Yeah. But even here, there was not a white Christmas in the Pacific Northwest, just a soggy Christmas.
Yeah, I
Soggy.
forgot that you were in Hawaii during that time period.
Yeah. Yeah, we were there. It's funny when you look at pictures from something you've done recently. I realized this how I was looking through them today and I felt so powerfully back in the moments looking at those
Mm,
pictures. Like I was right back there. It was really stirring to see, especially when you are in a different element, like a completely different place.
yeah. Oh gosh, it's nice.
Well, Deborah usually reads the Solid Ground intro for us, but I'll read it today since she's not here. Solid Ground is a peer support community for anyone concerned about the imposition of critical social justice and or authoritarian measures such as medical mandates in their workplace, university, children's schools, or community. We offer weekly online peer support groups in which members share ideas, thoughts, and support for how to navigate the impact of these ideologies and answer the question, where do we go from here? You can join our peer support group for $10 a month, and you can join our forum on locals for $5 a month. To find out more, please visit solidgroundsupport.com. And please note that Solid Ground does not provide psychotherapy or legal advice, and nothing we do should be construed as such. It is a 2-year-old venture at this point. This is our
Wow.
second anniversary. We launched on January 1st of 2023. Now we are in 2025. And
Wow.
yeah, it's hard to believe so much
Flown.
time has passed, right?
Yeah, it's flown by.
It has flown. And it's a really good group. We're sort of doing a little bit of restructuring right now. We have some people who prefer to just use the online forum on locals and they don't really attend the groups very much. And then we have some people who attend the groups and don't really do much chatting on locals. So we want to kind of separate those out and let people have access to both. And so that's kind of the plan. If you go to our website again at solidgroundsupport.com, it's currently I'm reworking some things on there. So you'll see changes that are happening, but the information there is still good. And you can email us. The email address is on the website. So please do get in touch if this is something that you're interested in doing. And hi, Marie Picard. She's in the chat. Nice to see you. Trudeau stepped down. Did you hear about that, Jen?
I did. I heard that that was about to happen. Yes. One of the people from my old counterweight group posted that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know any of the details of that or what his official reason is for doing that. Do you know anything about it?
No,
No.
I just know I'm happy.
Hmm. Yeah, he's been kind of a nightmare. So it's
Pretty
great.
much.
Hmm.
Yeah, it is great. It's a beautiful thing.
There are several people who are wanting to know why you are all bundled up and if your heat is out. They're worried about you and want to know if they can come over and light
What?
you a fire.
No, but they can come over and hug me because that's so sweet. No, I just feel a bit chilly. It's very cold here today, and I feel a bit chilly. And when I run my condo heat, it just feels too, I don't really like artificial heat sources. It just feels kind of dry and icky. So I'm just bundling instead.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I have my electric blanket over my lap. That's my heat source.
Oh,
Yeah. So let's see. I maybe for people who are new, we could kind of recap how we started this group. You
yeah.
were you were a big part of that force. You and Jody Shaw were the main drivers of organizing us to get this going.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I've been working with how long was I with Counterweight? I guess that was about a year or so. Do you remember? Does that sound right? About a
Sounds
year?
about right. About a year.
Yeah.
So
And
what
we
would that
were,
have been? 2021 to 22?
yeah, or maybe the tail end of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, because when Helen Pluckrose was helping people to formulate um, ethical arguments against the imposition of critical social justice, she started noticing that people were also having, a lot of distress by being bullied around those issues at work. And so she asked me to start talking to people and kind of offering support. And then that's how the peer support program and Counterweight got going. Um, Meeting with people individually, and you came on board and you were helping meeting with people individually. And then we started several groups. And then when Counterweight kind of closed up shop, when Helen got sick, then we started Solid Ground so that we could continue the peer support work. So it's really just like a continuation of the peer support element of Counterweight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's really taken on a life of its own with the community. There seems like there's a core group of people who've been there since the beginning or since early on in the project, and then more new people come, and it's a really nice, welcoming group.
Yeah, that's really good.
Hmm. Yeah, a lot of people are having some issues with the weather. Yeah. Upstate New York, Cody R is chilly also, I think. And Home at Last says, Leslie and Jen, I had suggested in the comments a couple of weeks ago that you consider dissident shrink Bruce Levine as a guest on the show. Wanted to mention it
Hmm.
again in case you missed it. Do you know who he is?
No, I don't know who he is. Tell us
Um,
more, Home at Last, because that
yeah,
would be interesting.
yeah, we'd be happy to talk to him if he's interested in talking to us and give us a link or something for his to get a hold of him or read about him.
Yeah, always happy to meet a dissident.
Hmm. So, how's your new year and what does January 6th mean to you?
My new year is good. It is really good. It's first holiday season post marital separation for me. So that was
Hmm.
actually kind of tough, not because I, in any shape or form, wish that my husband would reappear, um, but just because it's unexpected, to
Hmm.
find myself at the holidays um, as a unmarried person for
Hmm.
the first time. And I don't know, 16 years is
Long time.
startling. Yeah, yeah. So that was weird, but I'm yeah, I'm enjoying meeting new people. And so my New Year's good. And January 6th, I just I mean, I can tell you what I hope it doesn't mean. I hope it doesn't mean a lot of pearl clutching and hysteria.
Yeah, that's interesting. I remember when I wonder if I have the email Antioch sent us about January 6th.
I
That would
remember
be
you
fun.
sharing it. It
Do
was
you?
so histrionic.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can find it, I would love
I
to.
I want to see if I can.
This is so overblown.
Yeah, I don't have access to that email account anymore, but I have some things archived.
Yeah. It's not that I don't think there were some, bad actors that day. I just don't think that we were like there was I don't think there was an existential threat to our democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so
What
I
year was
think
that? 2019,
that was, uh, that was,
20?
that was, that would have been 20. Wait, now I have to look it up. This is not ridiculous. I don't
No,
know.
it's not ridiculous because I'm in the same boat. I
everything
just,
everything has blurred in my life, I feel like, since COVID 2020. It's like all the dates run together.
hmm. Oh, well, yeah, maybe this is it. Um, okay. So this is dated 1/11/21. So it was 2021.
Yeah, I just found that. I just Googled it. Yeah.
It says Justice Leadership Council, I think the JLC, Justice Leadership Council, and SG, which must be student government, response to recent events. And this is from Antioch announcements. It says, Dear AUNE, which is Antioch University, New England community. We, members of the Justice Leadership Council and AUNE student government, are unashamedly acknowledging and condemning the events that transpired in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021. White supremacy has existed and continues to exist in this country since before its inception, to the detriment of the lives and well-being of Black, Brown, and Indigenous peoples. The reprehensible events of January 6th represent the culmination of not only the last 4 years of white supremacist domination facilitated by the occupant of the White House, but of the previous 400 plus years of flourishing, unacknowledged, race-based hatred in the United States. We will not stand for complicity, and we will not stand for silence on this issue. We empathize with the intense pain that many of our community members are currently experiencing, especially our BIPOC peers and colleagues. We stand in solidarity with our BIPOC community members as we once more witness the hypocrisy embedded in our society. White terrorists can storm the U.S. Capitol and walk out relatively unscathed and with minimal police violence, while Black and Brown people cannot protest peacefully for their own lives without being met with brutality. As community organizers and leaders, we will continue to put our power behind supporting BIPOC community members in our roles at AUNE and in all aspects of our lives. We are committed to furthering AUNE's mission of social justice in this way by speaking truth to the reality of the moment and by centering the needs of the marginalized folks in the work that we do. If you need individual or community resources at this time, please feel free to reach out to JLC AUNESG or take advantage of the resources and opportunities listed below. And that is okay. And then here's that they invite you here. Members of Chi Sigma Lotta CMHC Honor Society. So that's the Counseling Master's Programs Honor Society, right? JLC and student government have also begun to come together thanks to support from the AP, what is that, AP department? Applied something, I don't
Is
know,
it applied psychology?
maybe. AP department's Racial and Social Justice Initiative Fund, RSJI, to organize a difficult dialogue series, which will include a BIPOC-only affinity and support group,
Ooh.
a white identifying accountability group, and a full group dialogue at least once a month. Stay tuned for dates and times, and please contact us if you'd like to get involved. In Strength and Solidarity, AUNE Justice Leadership Council and AUNE Student Government.
I bet that reminds you of why you're not there anymore.
Isn't that really fascinating
I
that
like how there's an affinity group, but the white people have to be held accountable.
there's an accountability
But you
group?
can't be accountable. You cannot be accountable for other people's actions. We recognize this, or we used to recognize this in the mental health community as codependence. If you think you're responsible for other people's actions. And now all of that was one of my biggest problems with all these woke ideas was you're making people responsible for actions that are not their own and that they can't control. And it could very well be actions that to which a person is opposed.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's so crazy making.
Yeah, crazy making indeed. It's pretty stunning. I mean, that language, I feel like I can kind of become a little complacent sometimes because I've distanced myself from a world where people talk like that to me.
Yeah.
I said, peace out. I'm not doing this anymore. And this is so horrible that everybody needs to hear how horrible this is. And then I exited that track and I carved out my own path. And so I talk to people who have been dealing with this, but I'm like a couple of steps removed from it at this point. But then reading that again, and I had this conversation recently with a guy who is still in his master's in counseling program. I just put it up on my YouTube channel last week, I think. Ryan Rogers. He's really good at articulating what's happening, and the stuff that he's encountering is just super shocking.
Is it as bad as it was back in 2020?
It's worse.
Oh no, see, I am living in a little bit of a fantasy. Being in private practice, I am not encountering this. I'm not forced to go to strange workshops or I'm told that I'm racist or any such thing. And so, oh, wow. I know you already posted the thing so people can watch the video so people can watch it, but can you say just a little bit in a nutshell about how it's worse, what he's encountering?
Yeah, it seems like it's just the counseling the culturally diverse, which I thankfully moved away from right here where it's been sitting for like the last month. That book, that horrible book by Gerald Wing Sue. They're still using those texts, that as their text. Is they've got a new updated edition, which actually identifies Black people who disagree with this whole rhetoric about white supremacy being everywhere all the time, all at once, and the cause of all your problems. It actually identifies them as having Uncle Tom syndrome.
Ooh,
This is for counselors.
that's nice. So, I mean, the level of I mean, that is so disrespectful and so condescending. So we get to decide what all Black people should think and believe.
Mhm.
How is that not racist and controlling?
And well, and it's interesting because one of the things, if you're familiar with Gerald Wing Sue, who's the
Oh,
architect of all of this
yeah,
kind of
I've
stuff.
seen I've seen excerpts from that book, so I'm familiar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a Chinese American man, and I believe that David Sue, so the book is Sue and Sue. They're the co-authors of this text that they keep pumping out new editions. I think they are the ones who constructed the entire idea of cultural competency for KCREP and for the ACA, but I'm not sure about that. So I'd love to have a resource. I'd love to have confirmation on that, but I believe they are the ones who came up with that. They are Chinese American, and one of the things that he does overtly is he criticizes Western individualism as being a problem, and that he talks about how we should be more collectivist in our thinking. That he basically praises collectivist thinking, and puts down individualist thinking, and then a lot of his textbook is devoted to sort of a taxonomy of race, like, here's how Black people are. Here's how Native American people
Oh
are.
gosh, that's right. I
Yeah.
remember reading that. Yeah, you're
Here's the
bringing it all
kinds of
back to
food that
me.
they like. Here's how to look at them, and do not
Right.
look them in the eye if they're in these groups. Look them in the
Right.
eye if these
Right.
groups are going to be uh, really family oriented, and so you can't counsel them in this particular way. These groups are really individualist and whatever, and so there's the white identity formation model that he comes up with, which I found particularly galling because it's like this it's like a case study of a hypothetical white person where I remember this kind of like all of their early memories are of white faces. They only see white faces around them. So the first time they see a darker skinned face, they're immediately going to put them in the other camp. And it was this is kind of like, well, maybe that one guy was like that, but
Right.
you can't really it's so they're so specific in their detailing of how different groups form, and it's equally offensive, the Black identity formation and like there's these phases people are supposed to go through if they're a BIPOC person, a marginalized person. They're supposed to go through like 4 identity development stages with regard to their race, and it's like I don't remember what they are. I wish I actually had it next to me because I could read them to you, but it's like at first they basically accept that they're less than, and then they start to wake up to the fact that they are being treated wrong, and then they get really angry about it, and then they settle into an anti-racist identity. And so it's like Kohlberg's theory of moral stage development,
Hmm.
but for race. And so basically they're diagnosing you at being at a lower stage of of racial identity development if you haven't yet come to an anti-racist perspective where you see white supremacy in everything.
There's a predetermined outcome, and that is the only measure of healthy development according to that model, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Oof.
Occam's stubble, that's an interesting username. I'm also very distanced from this kind of neurosis in my private practice, but I don't want to forget it's out there, which is why I watch.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's an important reminder for me too.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, he says,
yeah.
I'll have clients come in with this kind of thought process, and it's important to be able to speak the language even if you're not on board.
Hmm. Yeah, it is. If you don't speak the language, it is so baffling and disorienting to have that type of language thrown at you, because you know the ideas are quite suspect, but it's languaged in a way that somehow sort of camouflages things, and people get really, really confused when they're first exposed to it. So having some familiarity, and I think being able to frame things in a way such that the person can hear it depends in part upon being able to understand how they're using language.
Yeah, I think that it is really interesting how much this has become the language of policy and, you know, education, HR, these kinds of ways of thinking. I remember in 2019 when I started that CMHC program that I knew the language and I didn't know how I knew it, but I already kind of understood the things that they were saying. I was kind of surprised by how openly it was being used and how officially, because it seemed like it had no basis and grounding. But there was this way of talking that, like, the teacher said emotional labor, and we talked about marginalized and privileged, and we talked about white supremacy all the time. And it's sort of this zeitgeist thing. It just sort of infects everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so.
Mm. Marie Picard says the Ontario Health Ministry has a whole statement on cultural humility. It reads like a first year gender studies paper. It's hilarious and frightening at the same time.
I believe it.
Cody R. If we want to dwell on life experiences and act like that's all that really matters, growing up as a kid in poverty and subsidized housing my entire childhood, race was never relevant.
Yeah.
Another thing that Ryan Rogers mentioned that you might find interesting or particularly galling. I well, gosh, I wish I had these resources. I should sit here with all my stuff so I can just pull it up and like point to it. But my human sexuality class in graduate school was really bad in terms of promoting alternative sexuality
Hmm.
and suppressing and demonizing the idea of heteronormativity. That was a bad thing. But his has gotten, with the way he tells it, it's gotten even worse. And
No, how?
well, he gave an example that in class, he mentioned that maybe polyamory isn't for everyone, and he was shouted down. He was scorned for saying that was a really heteronormative thing for him to say, and it was wrong for him to say that.
Just to say it's not for everyone. I mean, is anything for everyone? For heaven's sake. I mean, we pretty much know that polyamory as a strategy, as a marital strategy, or um, you know, couples strategy does not work long term. We just know that. People can want it, and it's easy to understand why, but it's like that couple, the Gottmans, who study, they conduct research into marriage, what contributes to success, what contributes to the failure of a marriage, and what the warning signs of failure are. And they've been asked if, well, what about in polyamorous couples? And they said, we can't study them. We can't do a longitudinal study. They don't stay together long enough.
Mm-hmm.
They
That's
want
right.
to study them. They don't. Those unions don't last. There's the going outside of the union for intimacy with other people creates what we call an attachment injury over and over again. Even if both people are consenting and operating from the perspective of, hey, we love each other, we can make this work, we can stay together, we'll continue to prioritize each other, it still creates injury after injury and strikes at the roots of the attachment and trust.
That's right. Yeah, you're talking about John and Julie Gottman, and
That's it. The
they've
Gottmans.
written a lot of really great books on relationships and done a lot of really important research. And that's exactly right. They wanted to, John Gottman in an interview said he, non-judgmentally, they'd like to study this and be able to give
Mhm.
you tips on how to have a good polyamorous relationship, but they cannot get reliable data because they just don't last. They're
Yeah.
not stable.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting what you say about the attachment injuries that are created. It's like a pruning of the roots before they can grow deeper. It's like you keep cutting
Mhm.
the roots off because what you're doing when you are in that level, when you stay in that level of relationship, is you're preventing a deeper, more profound connection from ever forming. You're keeping things, it's almost like arrested development. You're keeping things in this very early phase of relationship where you're just still navigating trust issues and trying to decide what the boundaries of this really are.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. It's very true. I think, though, even with couples that have established roots, like couples that have been together for many, many years and then decide to try this because they think, oh, we're so secure, they soon find out that those roots can still be disrupted.
Mhm. Do you think that extramarital relations are ever part of a healthy relationship? Do you think it's possible to have an open relationship and have it be okay?
I think anything's possible, sure. I think it's statistically probably, I mean, an anomaly. I certainly think that some people who aren't in an open relationship and then a partner goes and has an affair while it enters the relationship, sometimes it can act as a catalyst for exploring issues that were not being addressed, and then the marriage can end up stronger. That can certainly happen.
Mhm.
So, and there are some very good reasons why people have affairs. And so I'm not, terribly judgmental and condemning about it at all. Um, and sometimes it does end up, if handled well, it can end up leading to good. That's not a reason to go do it. I'm doing this for the good of my marriage when you really just want to have it off.
Mhm.
Um, but but it can yield positive results for some people sometimes. But overall, I think I think polyamory is ill advised. I don't have judgments on people for doing it though, because I think it's pretty darn easy to understand why people would want to do it. I mean, who doesn't want to have their cake and eat it too? It's just, I think, I don't know if I ever mentioned this, but there's this book called The Paris Wife. It's a fictionalized account of Ernest Hemingway's first wife. I
Mm.
forget who the author is. It's brilliant. The
The
Paris Wife.
Paris wife.
Everybody should read it. But he was sort of an epic character, as we know, with multiple affairs and more than one marriage. And he wrote after some years when he was sort of collapsing into a depression, wrote to his first wife and said he's realized that paradise is a walled garden. And I
Hmm.
think that's what marriage is. It's a walled garden. You're saying no to the many to say yes to the one experience, that deeper experience. And the only way to get it is to put walls and boundaries around that paradise.
That's a really beautiful metaphor.
Yeah, I think it's true.
Mm. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I have appreciated some of what Esther Perel has said about this. If you've
Mm,
ever listened to her on infidelity.
a little bit. Yeah.
When I was oh gosh, my when I found out that my ex-husband was cheating on me quite prolifically back in 2014, I listened to her TED Talks and listened to a series of conversations that she had, and she did this short-lived podcast. I don't think that they kept going. Maybe it's not short-lived, but I at the time at least there was a finite number of episodes, and it seemed like they had closed it off. But it was called "Where Should I Begin?" or "Where Should We Begin?" Something like that. But you can find it just by looking her up. And she's so brilliant at getting to the root of what's affecting people in these conversations. You can hear her have a conversation with a new couple every episode. And there's just a couple that agrees to have their session taped with her. And the way she just breaks this down and sees the issues of connection it's so beautiful. It's like watching art, you know.
Oh
It's
wow.
amazing.
I'll have to watch that.
And
Listen to that. That sounds
one of the
great.
things she says is like in our modern life, we as adults, we can all most of us can expect to have two or three marriages, sometimes to the same person. So she's basically calling out the fact that we change so much. We have these longer lives and we have different life structures and different relationship roles and expectations. And because of the way that we evolve over that period of time, you have to have the flexibility to allow the relationship to adapt and to change with the relationship. And so you can end up married to the same person for years and years and maybe for life, but it's almost like it evolves into these distinct phases as it goes.
Yeah.
Marie says Esther has a lot of insight, but she could be encouraging some people to stay in unhealthy relationships. I I don't know, maybe I felt like my one criticism of her when I was going through the pain of infidelity, and I was really devastated. I mean, the talk about an attachment injury. I was so hurt. I was so hurt. It was like a death. It was like
Mhm.
suffering it was as if my husband had died and he was also the man who killed my husband. That's how it felt.
Oh God, I know this feeling.
Because
It's nightmarish. It is like the just your whole foundation has just
absolutely.
collapsed.
Yeah.
Nightmarish, yeah.
I had a 2-year-old and a 4-month-old. I think he was about 4 months old when I found out, and it had been going on since my 2-year-old was 11 months old. I mean, it had been going on. It was just so much. It was so bad and it was so gratuitous. And it hurt me so much to think that everything that I thought was reality was based on something that was a fiction or was a mask. And I kept coming across different perspectives on affairs and infidelity as I was trying to understand what had happened. I was coming across people who really seemed like it was not that big of a deal to them. Like maybe it hurt their pride, but they didn't seem as deeply shook by it as I was.
Mhm.
And I felt like Esther's her take on infidelity didn't map onto the devastation of the experience that I was having. It was a little more casual. So that would have been my complaint
Yeah.
about her, my criticism about her at the time.
Yeah, I've had that sense from some of I haven't delved into her material at great length, but some of the little excerpts that I've watched, I've had that sense that she's a bit casual. And I don't know if that is a fair criticism or not because I haven't exposed myself to enough, but I don't think that it is something to be casual about. And I also don't think all affairs are equal. Someone who has a good marriage and maybe is out of town on a business trip and has a one-time affair and deeply regrets it, is different than reoccurring betrayal or betrayals that stand to devastate the entire family, perhaps legally or financially. There really are levels of this and how levels of destructiveness is
Hmm.
what I'm saying. And I think what
Hmm.
happened because there was so much in your situation that
Hmm.
it wasn't just, oh, he, made one mistake. He was
Hmm.
essentially living a double life,
A
which
double
makes you
life.
then you don't just question that person, you question yourself, you question your ability to perceive reality correctly, to
Right.
perceive all of your relationships correctly, to perceive yourself correctly, it rearranges your worldview and you feel like you are being rearranged on a cellular level. And it is absolutely a trauma to the individual who suffers it.
Yeah, I think that that's a really important thing that you're pointing out is the rearrangement of your worldview. And I felt like as I was sort of re oh, I guess recovering from it, that one of the biggest injuries was to my sense of trust in my own intuition. Because when something like this is going on and your partner is being hideously unfaithful to you and betraying your trust, you it's not usually like you don't know at all, like you don't have any idea. It's that when you come to them and test your concerns and look for confirmation of reality and look for, are we okay? Is there something going on? It's all of your attempts to understand the nature of your relationship and your world and with this person are deliberately thwarted by the other person and undermined.
Right.
So it's a process of teaching you to not trust your own intuition or judgment. And that I think was probably the biggest harm that came out of that. I mean, the attachment injury, the devastation of what the family was, those are huge. But the ultimately the loss of trust in my own mind was probably the biggest injury.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
see.
It cannot be overstated how profound that effect is.
There's a couple of comments that JC Daedalus, the collector, says if the person was good enough, their partner wouldn't want somebody else. And the other way around is also true. The truth is, if the person is good enough, their partner wouldn't want somebody else. Ain't no way around it. And saying poly doesn't change it. And I think that's kind of the feeling that people have after they've been cheated on. That's one of the things we tell ourselves. It was me. I wasn't good enough. If I was better,
Just
but
not.
that's just not true.
It's just not true. People that are absolutely wonderful get cheated on all the time. People that are drop dead gorgeous, people that are average. It can happen to anybody, and it is not your job to control your partner, and it is beyond your control. And I think that the idea that if you're good enough, it won't happen to you is actually a self protective fantasy. And I wish it were true, but it's just not.
Hmm. Yeah, there's so much good conversation going on.
Yeah, pull something else out.
Cody R. I was cheated on and struggled with that in my divorce. Struggling with what I thought was reality. Was I loving something that didn't really exist? I loved who and what she wanted me to, a facade.
Mm.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Cody. That was something that I had a lot of trouble with. Like I couldn't even look for the longest time. It was like what happened created a hole in my life where not only did my future change because of it, because I had to reconfigure my thoughts about who we were. And when you're married, you're raising children with somebody, you're in a life with someone, you know that they might die and you know that you might die. You don't know what the future holds exactly. Things could happen. Somebody could get sick, but you have this commitment that you are continually reaffirming to each other that we are here together and we face what comes together as long as we're capable of doing it. And when the person that you rely on pulls the rug out from under you and says, psych, I never was what you thought I was. I was never really here for you in the way that you
Mhm.
thought I was here for you, then your entire future changes the way that you
That's
perceive
right.
it. But also your past changes too, because
That's
all
right.
that time you look back at photos and it's like, who was I standing next to? Who is that person that in that moment I felt such a great sea of affection for? And now I look at that and I see all the things that were going on that had that were a direct threat to me and my family.
That's right. Yep.
Ninja Kitty says, I've heard people say, show me the most beautiful, wonderful, kind, thoughtful woman/man in the world, and I will show you someone who is sick of them."
Oh my
Kind
gosh.
of sad.
That's it's so true though. It's so sad.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I think happens in couples is people stop really appreciating their partner and how unique their partner is and how interesting and all that their partner does and starts taking it for granted and um, just not kind of like not giving the person credit for what they are bringing to the relationship, but focusing instead on what they're not bringing.
Mhm. Well, I wonder if a part of the whole poly thing, that's such a trend right now, and young people seem to be it, it seems like it started with the I'm cool with hookups. It's okay if
Mm.
he doesn't want to commit, like the sort of cool girl attitude towards dating that that people were commenting on this 10, 15 years ago, that there was this surge of sort of more casual sex, and suspecting that this wasn't necessarily because women wanted it, but rather because it became the only viable mating strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and now with poly, I wonder to what extent does it represent just a giving up on the possibility of of a monogamous connection. And I actually found
Yeah.
myself in the course of this counseling program and all of this new way of talking about human sexuality, I found myself wondering, is it even realistic that we expect monogamous relationships, and especially in the wake of my own relationship betrayal? Like, are we are we expecting too much from each other when you want to have a pair bonded monogamous relationship?
Eh, I mean, maybe, but you know what? I think you don't kill off the gold standard just because it's hard to reach, even if it's aspirational.
Hmm.
I think it's worthy of aiming for it. I'm going to aim for it again.
Yeah.
I'm going to. Yeah.
Cece says very few women are polyamorous with conviction.
Yeah. Well, I suspect that there's some truth in that. And I've, worked with some people that are in those relationships, and I've known of women that were engaging in polyamory actually for them as a means of maintaining some sense of control because they felt that their partner was bound to cheat anyhow. And so this would at least be sort of a controlled release. They'd be kind of going out there with the person and meeting other people, and that it would be sort of a create some mutuality around the experience. Uh, but that was not really working for them emotionally. So sometimes it's like the person is trying to strike some kind of bargain between what their real wants and desires are and what they believe to be possible.
Mhm. Yeah, KJ, poly is a great way to hide and avoid full vulnerability. And then JC Daedalus says maybe society is suffering through some collective collapse in the dream of true love and marriage, maybe a mass epidemic of marital nihilism and pessimism. Hmm. Yeah, Ninja Kitty says amazing how hurt we can get, yet so often willing to try again, as there is zero in life that can offer what true love can.
Oh, that's a nice way of putting it.
Hmm. It's strange to find yourself divorced in middle age.
Especially if you didn't do a single damn thing to cause it. It does not always take two. No, it does not.
Mhm.
Nope. Sometimes you could have a partner that has such deep-seated issues that no matter what circumstance they find themselves in, they're going to do destructive things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a comment earlier that I saw, and I don't remember who made it, but it was about the relationship with personality disorders and polyamorous lifestyles.
Oh, there's a connection.
What do you think?
Fuck yes, there's a connection. Fuck yes. Of course there is. And that's not to say all people who are polyamorous have a character disorder. No, I am not saying that. I'm just saying, come on.
I
Yeah.
noticed that you said character disorder.
Instead of personality disorder, I
Hmm.
prefer that. I prefer that term
Will you say a little more about that?
because I do think that character is hardwired into people. And I think they changed it to personality disorder to sound a bit less pejorative.
Hmm.
Um, and there are people that have, um, there's people that have borderline personality disorder where the harm that they do is mainly to themselves and they are less destructive to others. Um, than you might think with that diagnosis. But then there are people with that diagnosis and the diagnosis of narcissism and antisocial that absolutely destroy the lives of those around them. And they have a lot of energy. They're very powerful. Their projections are very powerful. It is easy to buy into it and find yourself lost. And it can happen to extremely smart, competent people. And so I think that people should be aware and that they should be cautious about this and not just, it's sort of popularized on Instagram like, oh, I have this, like I'm a victim of having narcissistic personality disorder. And no, 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 you're not. I do think I think it's a description of a character
Mhm.
type. I don't think it's an illness. I do think people can be helped with it if they have the willingness and interest. Um, but I think people should be careful
Mhm.
because people really can't. We want to think. I think especially in America because we are kind of like the land of like the independent and pioneer spirit, and you go out and you make your own. You make your own luck, and we are that, and it's great. But we also sometimes slide into denial about how much one person can impact us. And we should be aware that there's people that do have poor character that can ruin us.
How how prevalent do you think character disorders are? And do you think that the word narcissism is overused, or do you think that it's being
Yeah, of
appropriately
course.
used?
I mean, of course, I think it's getting overused now, but I don't know how prevalent. I think it's on the rise. I think we are sort of, I think our culture is fostering unhealthy levels of narcissism
Mhm.
because of social media largely, and because also of woke ideology really focusing on encouraging people to build identity around things that to me don't really say much about your value as a
Mhm.
person, but to kind of have an identity and use it as a shield and also as a weapon against other people. So I think there's a lot of that. Yeah, I don't know the exact prevalence,
Hmm.
but I feel like I kind of agree with some of Josh Slocum's take that we're sort of living in a cluster B world. I see more and more of it. And maybe I'm looking for it more. So maybe I have my own confirmation bias. But
Mhm.
to me, a lot of the stuff that's in the mainline media to me feels histrionic. It feels like this is histrionic
Mhm.
personality disorder or character disorder being
Mhm.
displayed when things are completely overblown and distorted and made to amp people up. I think it's histrionics.
One thing I feel like I see is like, is people who mm, display borderline characteristics tend to see that in the people that they encounter, tend to see more narcissism and borderline in the people in their lives. It's kind of like a projection. Do you see what I'm saying?
Maybe.
They're
So
very quick to.
maybe I'm a raging borderline and I
No,
don't know it and I'm
I didn't
projecting.
mean it like that. I
Watch
didn't mean it like
out.
that. No, but it's just like for instance, this is a very common thing you see in a divorce situation. It's like a
Yeah.
projection. You're like the cheating spouse who is super jealous and watchful of their spouse because whatever they're
Oh
doing,
boy.
they're, expecting the other to do as well.
That's right. That's right. That I can't trust you. I can't trust you. I have to watch you. Why? Because you know you're not trustworthy. And so
Mhm.
you're assuming that other people also are not. Yeah.
Mm. JC Daedalus says, I'm sorry you went through a divorce and hurt, Leslie. I think my previous comment was misunderstood as I did not mean to say people who were hurt were not good enough. No, that's fine. That's totally fine. Just interesting to see people's takes on things. And I actually enjoy when something doesn't, when it doesn't, uh, I don't agree with it because I can talk about it more and investigate
Yeah.
it a little bit more.
Yeah. Feel free, people. Just feel
Yeah.
free to disagree with us or post something that's challenging or give us a different way to look at things. Please. It's interesting.
Mhm. Kathleen says, a little behind, but that grief over feeling like you can't trust your own intuition anymore. Oof. Often it's more painful than the actual act. That's, I think, one of
100%.
the things that's so harmful about social justice ideology and a lot of these like the way that people were treated around COVID as well. This don't trust your own lying eyes thing, this racial identity development stuff. All of this is a way of telling you you may think you understand the world, but actually we're going to tell you how it really is, and it's really this. And
Right.
it's so harmful to people to be
It's really
forced.
this. And
Yeah.
if you don't believe these ideas and now champion these ideas, will come for you. But we're really benevolent. We're
Hmm.
the good ones. We
Hmm.
just want to ruin your career if you disagree.
Hmm. Yeah. It's not very different from a betrayal of a partner if it's something you can't escape from.
Not that different from domestic abuse. There's a lot of the same tactics to use. Kafka traps and the double binds. It's all, and the gaslighting. It's all there.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, similar patterns. Hypatia Maxima says, yes, character disorders slash personality disorders in one partner can create personality disorders in the partner. This is known in narcissistic personality disorder. Interesting. What do you know of that or think of that?
Yeah, I think people, it's sad to say, I think people in our close people in our lives can make us crazy
Hmm.
and make us do things that violate our own conscience and sense of integrity if you're really driven to the point. Like, let's say your partner is doing things that are is really harmful or deceptive and you know about it and you try to talk to your partner and they keep trying to flip the script on you and make you think you're to blame or try to get you to deny the truth that's right in front of your eyes. You can eventually lose your shit and start screaming and yelling and maybe throw something, even if you're a person that would never normally do that. And then you feel ashamed of yourself. And then you think, see, my partner's right. I really am kind of crazy. And it pulls you, and then you're apologetic and it pulls you back into that cycle. It's very powerful.
Is there a name for that cycle or some way of
I
identifying
mean,
it?
that's
Because it does
actually
seem
it's
like a common pattern.
yeah, I mean, it's really there is a new name for it that I keep seeing where they call, and I don't know if I like this term or not, but they call it reactive abuse, where you
Oh,
react to abuse by sort of becoming a bit abusive yourself, like not necessarily, like hitting the person, but you just can't take it anymore and you kind of snap and behave out of character for yourself. Like someone who has not behaved that way previously across a range of situations now finds themselves screaming, yelling, throwing things um,
hmm.
because they have just been pushed to the brink and they can't pull themselves back from it because they're so invested in trying to work things out with that person and they keep having these non productive conversations because they think they're going to get reason out of the other person. But every time they're going in with good faith to save the relationship, and the other person is in the position of, I'm going to defend myself and maintain the status quo. And if I have to make you think you're crazy to do it, I
Mm-hmm.
will.
Mm-hmm.
I'll make you think you're paranoid. Like, no, I'm not cheating on you. No, I'm not doing X, Y, Z. And eventually the other person could snap and act in a way that they normally wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is the codependency cycle. That, I mean, that's very real, to become codependent when you're in an intimate relationship with somebody that's character disordered.
Mm-hmm.
Because you do start trying to contain their behavior,
Mm-hmm.
much as you would if you were the spouse of an alcoholic. You don't want them to get drunk and miss work the next day and possibly get fired from yet another job. So you start to exhibit controlling, micromanaging behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And no blame on that person, because they're just trying to manage their bloody lives, you know? But it can happen too if you know, well, this or that sets off the person who's narcissistic, or this will result in this borderline episode of rage where they're accusing me of all kinds of things. And maybe they're yelling and screaming and frightening the kids. So I'm going to behave in this particular way to try to head that off at the pass. It's our survival instinct. So we're trying to create a safe environment, but we start trying to control the other person.
If you're speaking to someone who has started to have started to notice that they're being codependent or controlling of their partner and wants to walk that back, what advice do you give them?
I would say pull back a bit, kind of zoom out and start watching, and start writing down what you see and what happens, and reread it later so you can look at it with some objectivity.
Mm-hmm.
And do this sort of, kind of do like a little bit of data collection, like just the facts, man. Okay, they did A, B, and C. Those things are objectively not okay. So no matter what they say about, well, I only did that because you da da da, fill in whatever crazy blank you want. You know they did A, B, and C. You're married to a person who keeps doing A, B, and C. And to stick to the facts and to try to pull back a bit, step back, stop trying to control, get some objectivity, and look at the situation.
That's really good advice. And sort of stop engaging in the rationalization loop that they're trying to put you into.
That's right. And stop trying to persuade that person of whatever you're trying to persuade them of, whether if it's that you are a trustworthy, good person, or you know that they're cheating, or you know they're doing these things, but they're making you feel crazy about it. Just stop having those conversations for a while. Or that you can't leave me because you're responsible for my well-being, and maybe I'll kill myself if you go. Just pull back and just start watching.
Mm-hmm. JC Daedalus gives us a $10 super chat. Thank you so much.
Oh my God, that's so sweet. Thank you.
He says, just want to say you guys are awesome for doing these discussions. Well, I think you guys are awesome for joining us and engaging. This would be this without y'all, it would just be Jennifer and I having a chat, which is good too, but it's great to have your input. Yeah, it's interesting where we ended up in this conversation, from talking about January 6th to reading the statement written by the school, which was a real piece of work. If you guys missed that, if you've joined us since then, go back to the beginning of this conversation, and I read the entire statement that was issued by Antioch University on January 11th, 2021, in response to January 6th. And you can see the things that they say, including they always called Trump the occupant of the White House. This was one of the overt political things that they did, which was they just called him the occupant. And they called him white supremacist over and over during his presidency. Well, he's, whatever you think of him, he was the president. And for a school to be coming out on one side politically the way that they were always struck me as really unprofessional and unethical.
I think so. Well, and it's not teaching people critical thinking. I mean, they can, talk about the facts, but I think the job of the university would be to help the students understand the facts and examine the facts critically from multiple different angles and then come to their own conclusions, and to be able to formulate clear, concise arguments for why they've come to the conclusions about that event that they've come to. Not to tell them, this is the only thing you're allowed to think about this particular event. That is not the job of a university.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's what they seem to think their job was. And as they told us, as counselors, your number one job is to be an activist and an advocate for social justice. So I think that was pretty much the number one job of every human being, according to them, no matter what
Right,
your role was.
right.
Put that in front of all your other duties.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's been an hour, so we'll conclude for today. Any final thoughts, Jennifer, or anything you want to say that we didn't get to?
No, I think that's it. Just Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you. Are you looking forward to anything this week?
Hmm. Yes, but I won't say.
Oh, a woman must keep some mystery. Well, it's lovely talking with you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us in the chat. And we will look forward to seeing you next Monday. We should have Christine, Deborah, and Jenny Holland with us next Monday. And we'll see y'all then. Bye.